There are 10 signs that reveal when a man secretly hates himself, and most never see them until it's too late. Self-hatred doesn't arrive with violence or confession. It creeps in quietly, disguising itself as humility, politeness, or care for others. It's not a feeling, it's a pattern of behavior, invisible to the one performing it, but obvious to those who understand power. A man who despises himself doesn't weep or scream, he simply adjusts, day by day, to a smaller existence. He rationalizes his own invisibility. He learns to live beneath his potential and call it kindness. And the tragedy is, no one tells him what's happening, because the world benefits from men who hate themselves just enough to stay obedient. Self-hatred is not an emotion, it's a ritual. It's the silent repetition of choices that strip you of sovereignty. Every time you speak softly to avoid offending someone who wouldn't hesitate to offend you, you're participating in that ritual. Every time you hold your tongue when truth burns inside you, you're bowing before your own executioner. Self-hatred is sophisticated. It doesn't shout, it whispers, "Be less." It tells you to apologize for your tone, your confidence, your presence. It trains you to find comfort in apology and pride in restraint. It convinces you that politeness is virtue, even when it's self-erasure. The man who hates himself believes peace comes from pleasing others. But real peace only comes from standing in one's own authority, unshaken, unbent, unapologetic. Before we begin, write this in the comments. I am done hating myself in silence. Now let's uncover the 10 signs that reveal when a man secretly hates himself before it's too late. The first sign is this: you apologize for existing. You shrink when praised. You downplay your wins. You speak as if you're asking permission to breathe. Watch the man who says sorry for speaking too long, for standing too close, for having an opinion. Notice how he laughs off compliments, how his posture folds inward as if the air itself is too heavy for him to inhabit fully. He calls himself humble, but humility without power is humiliation. His voice trembles not because he lacks words, but because deep down he fears being seen. To him, visibility feels like guilt. Every glance from others is a trial. Every silence feels like judgment. So he apologizes again and again until the habit becomes a reflex and his existence becomes an apology in itself. You can recognize this man anywhere. He's the coworker who over-explains, the friend who says just kidding after every serious statement, the partner who smiles while breaking inside. He believes he must earn every ounce of respect he receives. Compliments embarrass him because somewhere in his mind he's already disqualified himself from admiration. When he speaks, he watches faces, scanning for micro-reactions, terrified of disapproval. He would rather be tolerated than revered, because reverence demands self-belief. He tells himself he's considerate. He tells himself he's easygoing. But those are just elegant disguises for self-erasure. The world doesn't see his suffering. They see a polite man, a cooperative man, a harmless man. And the cruel truth is, society rewards him for it, because no one fears a man who doubts his own worth. But understand this: the man who cannot stand firm in his own value will be dominated by anyone who can. That is the first political truth of human nature. Every empire begins with a hierarchy of self-respect. If you cannot assert your place in your own mind, you will be conquered by the confidence of others. They will sense it, your hesitation, your need to be liked, your hidden plea for validation, and they will use it. The weak are not crushed by force. They are volunteered sacrifices. Self-hatred is not a wound. It's an invitation to be used. It marks you like a scent, and predators smell it. They know you'll apologize for their offenses, forgive their betrayals, and thank them for crumbs of attention. You call it compassion. They call it opportunity. This is how men lose power. Not through defeat, but through consent. They consent to being smaller. They consent to being overlooked. They call it peace, but it's decay. The one who hates himself doesn't need an enemy. His own mind wages the war. He builds the cage, locks the door, and still wonders why he feels trapped. Self-hatred is efficient. It requires no punishment, because the man punishes himself. He overthinks every word, rehearses every apology, seeks approval like a starving man begging for scraps. Each act of self-abandonment feels virtuous in the moment. I don't want to cause trouble, he says, but soon he realizes that the trouble is inside him. The trouble is the silence he swallows to keep others comfortable. The trouble is the unspoken resentment that festers behind every forced smile. The trouble is the belief that love must be earned through obedience. What most men don't realize is that self-hatred can masquerade as morality. They confuse submission with goodness. They think being agreeable will buy them peace. But peace built on self-denial always ends in quiet rage. You cannot serve others honestly when you despise yourself. You will give too much, expect too little, and call it virtue. And every night, when the room is dark and the noise fades, you will hear that small voice asking, "Why do I keep disappearing?" That question is your only chance at redemption. Because once you hear it, once you recognize that the pattern of apology has become your identity, you have a choice: to continue being invisible or to become dangerous again. Dangerous not in cruelty, but in conviction. A man who no longer apologizes for existing is a man the world must reckon with. But few take that step. Most are addicted to approval because it feels safer than power. Approval is predictable, power is not. To claim your space is to risk rejection. To speak your truth is to invite conflict. So most men never escape the polite prison. They stay silent, hoping to be loved for their restraint, unaware that love built on submission always turns into contempt. The world doesn't admire the man who apologizes for existing. It forgets him, and he in turn begins to forget himself. Every sorry chips away at the architecture of his identity, until one day he realizes he has nothing left to defend. No pride, no standard, no voice, only the habit of making others comfortable. And yet, the most dangerous form of self-hate isn't this. The apology is merely the symptom. The next sign is far more insidious, because it doesn't look weak. It looks disciplined. It looks productive. It looks like control. Men mistake it for strength, but it's a quiet form of self-punishment, a psychological addiction to suffering disguised as improvement. You'll recognize it when we get there, because the moment you see it, you'll realize it's been driving your ambition all along. The second sign is far more deceptive than the first, because it hides behind the mask of discipline. It tells you that you're building yourself, but in truth, you're breaking yourself down piece by piece in the name of progress. This is the man who treats himself like a project to be fixed, rather than a life to be lived. He confuses punishment with growth. When he fails, he doesn't reflect, he berates. When he succeeds, he doesn't celebrate, he raises the bar higher so that satisfaction never touches him. He calls it ambition. He calls it self-mastery. But the truth is darker. He has mistaken cruelty for control. The man who hates himself believes he must earn rest, earn pride, earn peace, and he never allows himself to arrive at any of them. His work ethic is not love for excellence, it is fear of stillness. Because in stillness, the voice of his self-loathing becomes loud enough to hear. You can see this man in every gym at dawn, every office long after midnight. He moves with precision, speaks of discipline, and despises weakness, but only his own. He doesn't realize that his relentless drive is not born of strength but of self-rejection. He's not chasing greatness, he's running from inadequacy. He punishes himself for every mistake and calls it accountability. He starves his emotions and calls it focus. He isolates himself and calls it independence. He reads quotes about warriors, stoics, and emperors, yet cannot stand a day without shaming himself into action. The world praises him, because the world loves a man who bleeds quietly for approval. They call him admirable. He calls himself disciplined. But beneath that iron routine lies exhaustion, resentment, and an unspoken truth. He no longer knows how to rest without guilt. This is self-hatred disguised as virtue, the kind that society rewards. Because the man who punishes himself is easy to control. Tell him he's not doing enough, and he'll double his effort. Tell him he's replaceable, and he'll work through pain to prove otherwise. Tell him he's not there yet, and he'll spend his life chasing an invisible finish line. He mistakes abuse for motivation. He looks in the mirror and sees not potential but a debtor. He believes life owes him nothing, so he owes everything. He lives as though he must pay for his existence in sweat and sacrifice. And when he finally burns out, when his body trembles from exhaustion, he calls it weakness, because in his mind, suffering is sacred. Rest feels like sin. And yet, every man who burns himself to prove his worth eventually learns, the world does not remember martyrs. It remembers those who learn to stop bleeding for validation. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you did something without turning it into a test? When was the last time you allowed yourself joy without turning it into productivity? Men who secretly hate themselves do not know what contentment feels like. It terrifies them. They cannot sit still because their mind is a courtroom, and every moment of peace feels like negligence. They look in the mirror and see a defendant on trial, always defending, always proving, never free. They say, "I must earn respect," but they never define when that debt is paid. They speak of building empires, but they rule over ruins. Because when a man is at war with himself, victory in the world means nothing. He wins a battle, and his first instinct is not pride, it's to question whether it was enough. Every triumph is temporary, every victory is hollow, because the real enemy lives in the silence after applause. There's a difference between self-discipline and self-punishment, and most men never learn it. Discipline is direction, punishment is decay. Discipline comes from vision, punishment comes from shame. Discipline builds you, punishment breaks you in the name of improvement. The man who loves himself trains, learns, and grows because he believes he's worthy of becoming more. The man who hates himself does the same, but to prove he's not worthless. The results may look identical, but the energy is poison. One man ascends from confidence, the other escapes from self-disgust. And here's the Machiavellian truth. The world cannot tell the difference, but life can, because the man who grows from love moves with calm power, while the man who grows from hate moves with desperation. His success feels frantic. His pace feels unnatural. He cannot stop, because stopping would force him to meet the part of himself he's been running from. This illusion of strength becomes his prison. Every time he succeeds, the bar moves higher. Every time he achieves, the voice in his head whispers, "It's still not enough." And soon, he begins to resent everything that once inspired him. His goals turn into chains. His routines become rituals of self-loathing. He starts envying men who seem at peace, mistaking their balance for laziness. He can't understand how others can rest without guilt, so he secretly despises them. What he calls drive is actually self-torment. What he calls focus is fear of facing himself. He lives in constant performance, his worth measured by productivity, his soul hidden behind to-do lists. But the more he tries to earn his own respect through exhaustion, the deeper his hatred grows. Because no man can love himself through punishment. Pain does not purify self-loathing, it feeds it. And the cruel part is, he thinks this is strength. He wears his suffering like a medal. He believes it separates him from the weak. But the truth is, real strength has nothing to prove. Real power moves without explanation. The man who loves himself can rest without shame, because rest does not threaten his identity. The man who hates himself cannot stop moving, because movement is the only thing keeping his emptiness quiet. He believes that slowing down will destroy him, and he's right. It will destroy the false identity he's built from suffering. It will expose the truth he's been avoiding, that his drive was never about greatness, but about survival. He was never chasing excellence, he was fleeing inadequacy. And deep down, he knows it. So he pushes harder, pretending he's ascending, when in truth he's digging. He buries himself under layers of hustle, hoping no one sees the hollowness beneath. He mistakes exhaustion for achievement, pain for proof, control for confidence. He doesn't realize that he's becoming the very tyrant he swore to defeat, not in others, but in himself. The man who rules through fear cannot sustain his empire, and a man who governs himself through fear will collapse the moment silence returns, because eventually the punishment becomes unbearable. The body cracks, the mind rebels, the ambition rots into apathy, and when that day comes, he will have to face the third sign, the one that hides in plain sight, the one that looks like strength, sounds like independence, but is born entirely from fear. The third sign hides behind the illusion of strength. It's the mask men wear when they've been hurt so often that feeling anything begins to feel like weakness. This is the man who confuses detachment with control. He convinces himself that not needing anyone makes him powerful. He calls it independence, stoicism, emotional mastery, but in truth, it's exile. A self-imposed isolation dressed up as dignity. He tells himself he's above feelings, above attachment, above the chaos of human connection. But deep inside, what he really fears is rejection. His solitude isn't sovereignty, it's self-defense. He would rather live untouched than risk being unseen again. And the tragedy is, the more he guards himself from pain, the more he becomes numb to joy. This kind of man walks through life like a fortress. He listens, but never reveals, observes, but never participates. He knows how to give advice, but never how to accept love. He says, "I'm fine," even when he's drowning, because vulnerability feels like exposure, and exposure feels like death. He has built a throne out of his own silence and calls it strength, but what sits upon it is loneliness. To the world he appears calm, composed, mysterious, the man who can't be shaken, but what they don't see is the constant war inside him, the quiet ache of someone who's forgotten how to be known. The armor he wears isn't forged from steel, it's made from fear. Fear of needing, fear of trusting, fear of being seen in all his imperfection. You'll find him in every room, the one leaning back saying little, eyes unreadable. He studies everyone but allows no one to study him. He dismisses intimacy as distraction, affection as weakness, warmth as danger. When someone gets too close, he withdraws. When they stay distant, he blames them for not trying hard enough. His mind is sharp, his logic flawless, his discipline admirable, but his heart is imprisoned. He doesn't realize that what he calls independence is actually avoidance. That every time he refuses to let others in, he deepens the chasm he swore to escape. A man who isolates to protect his pride is like a king who burns his own castle to keep invaders out. Safe, yes, but homeless, secure, but empty. Understand this. Detachment without self-love is not power, it's paralysis. True strength is the ability to feel without crumbling. But when a man hates himself, he confuses numbness for peace. He tells himself he doesn't care, but he does. He tells himself he's immune, but he's not. He just learned to suppress rather than surrender. To suppress is to survive, but not to live. And the cruel irony is that his coldness, meant to protect him, only repels the very warmth that could heal him. People eventually stop trying to reach him. They admire his composure but never feel close to him. They mistake his distance for wisdom when it's really fear. And so his life becomes quiet, not serene but vacant. The silence he once desired becomes the silence that devours him. He tells himself he doesn't need love, but every night his mind invents it. He imagines scenarios where someone finally understands him, where he's seen without judgment, held without demand. But the moment that fantasy becomes real, he sabotages it. He grows cold, distant, critical. He finds flaws in others before they can find his. He ruins connection to preserve control. He says he's protecting his energy, but what he's really protecting is the wound that built his identity. Because if he ever allowed love in, he'd have to confront the possibility that he isn't as unshakable as he pretends. And that, to him, would be unbearable. The man who hides behind strength fears being exposed as fragile more than anything else. So he wears his isolation like a crown, convincing himself it's his choice, when in truth it's his cage. There's a Machiavellian truth hidden here. The world will never pity the man who feels nothing. It will exploit him. The cold man is predictable. He reacts to vulnerability with withdrawal, to affection with discomfort, to criticism with distance. And those who understand human nature use that against him. His stoicism becomes a tool for manipulation. He will stay silent while others decide his fate, too proud to object. He will endure betrayal without confrontation, calling it maturity. He will lose power, not through emotion, but through the absence of it. Because emotion, when controlled, is influence. Detachment, when absolute, is surrender. The man who feels nothing cannot lead, cannot connect, cannot inspire, because to move others, one must first be moved. And yet, he keeps pretending it's strength. He tells himself that feeling is foolishness, that caring is weakness, that silence is superiority. But deep down, he knows something is missing. He watches people laugh, love and lose, and envies them, though he'd never admit it. Because at least they are alive, he's merely functioning. He has built a kingdom of solitude and crowned himself its ruler, but he has no subjects, no allies, no warmth, only control, only the illusion of safety. And control without connection is the slowest kind of death. You can command the world and still feel invisible. You can master yourself and still be a stranger to your own heart. And when that realization dawns, when the silence grows unbearable, that's when the mask begins to crack. But he won't let it show. He'll tighten his grip, double down on discipline, remind himself that feelings are for the weak. He'll use logic to justify loneliness. He'll say, I just don't need people. But that's not enlightenment, it's exhaustion. Because no man was meant to survive entirely alone. The strong don't avoid emotion, they harness it. They don't retreat from connection, they refine it. They don't run from pain, they study it. The one who hides from feeling is not strong, he's just scared. Scared of how much power he's given to those who once hurt him. scared that if he lets go of the armor, he'll crumble, scared that if he loves again, he'll lose again. But what he doesn't know is that this fear, this constant control, is itself another form of slavery. And that is why the next sign cuts even deeper. It's not about emotion, it's about truth. It's what happens when a man stops believing his own instincts, when he begins to trust others' perceptions more than his own. It's the moment his inner voice goes silent and he starts outsourcing his reality to the world. And once that happens, he's no longer just detached, he's directionless. The fourth sign emerges when a man no longer trusts his own perception of reality. This is when self-hatred begins to rot the mind from the inside. He stops believing his instincts, his judgments, his intuition. Instead, he begins to outsource truth, to authority, to peers, to trends, to the opinions of those louder than him. He questions everything he feels, second-guesses every decision, and treats his inner voice like a liar. He tells himself he's being objective, open-minded, rational, but he's not. He's been psychologically disarmed. And what's left is a man who must look at others to know who he is. The mirror no longer reflects him, it reflects the expectations of the world. That's the quietest form of self-hatred, when you begin to doubt the one voice that was supposed to protect you, your own. You can see it in his behavior. He waits for permission before acting, validation before believing, applause before resting. Every idea he has must first be approved by someone else. Every emotion must be cross-checked to see if it's right. When he's angry, he wonders if he's overreacting. When he's happy, he wonders if he deserves it. He's lost the instinct to trust his own read of the world. This is how power collapses, not through defeat, but through doubt. The man who distrusts himself becomes easy to rule, because he'll always look outward for truth, and whoever controls that outward narrative owns him. He may think he's being humble, considerate, or balanced, but in truth, he's surrendered his sovereignty. A man without self-trust is not a free man. He's a marionette pulled by invisible strings. It starts small, a correction here, a criticism there. Someone questions his choices, and he absorbs it instead of reflecting on it. Maybe they're right, he thinks, and slowly those words become reflex. Soon, every opinion around him carries more weight than his own. He begins to believe that other people always know better about his relationships, his worth, his potential. His inner compass rusts from disuse. He stops navigating by instinct and starts waiting for direction. You'll see him ask others what he should feel, how he should act, who he should be. He adopts the language of the herd, thinking it will earn him belonging. But belonging purchased through obedience always comes with chains. He calls it growth, but it's regression, a return to dependency. He stops thinking like a man and starts reacting like a follower. Understand this. The moment you begin to doubt your perception, you hand your reality to someone else. And most people are happy to take it. The weak will use it to validate themselves. They'll make you feel crazy so they can feel sane. The powerful will use it to control you. They'll feed you illusions and call it guidance. And the world, full of noise and ego, will drown out your voice until you forget it was ever there. That's why self-trust isn't arrogance, it's armor. The Machiavellian man knows this. He knows perception is power, and he guards it like treasure. Because once the world convinces you that your instincts are unreliable, it can make you believe anything. You'll doubt your memories, your desires, your direction, until the only voice left in your head is someone else's command. The man who hates himself believes others see more clearly than he does. He defers to authority even when his gut screams otherwise. He agrees to things that make him uncomfortable, then convinces himself he's being reasonable. He senses deceit but calls it misunderstanding. He feels manipulated but fears confrontation. This constant self-doubt eats away at his sanity. He becomes pliable, easily swayed by charm, pressure, or guilt. The more he tries to be agreeable, the more he disappears. And here lies the cruel irony. He doesn't even notice, because self-hatred numbs awareness. The voice of reason that once guided him has been suffocated under years of second-guessing. He calls it peace, but it's sedation. He says he's open-minded, but he's open only because his boundaries are gone. A man who no longer trusts himself becomes dangerous in another way, not to others but to himself. He becomes a vessel for the beliefs of stronger minds. He repeats slogans, mimics emotions, and calls it individuality. He loses conviction and clings to conformity. His morality becomes borrowed, his opinions recycled, his goals imitated. You can see it in his conversations. His tone changes depending on who he's talking to. He mirrors people to be accepted, not realizing he's dissolving in the process. He believes that if he aligns with enough people, he'll eventually belong somewhere. But he won't. Because belonging without authenticity isn't belonging, it's dependency. He'll live surrounded by people and still feel invisible, because deep down, he knows none of them actually know him. How could they? He doesn't even know himself anymore. This is the ultimate erosion of power, when a man needs the world to tell him who he is. He dresses, speaks, thinks, and behaves according to what's rewarded. He has no inner law, no inner judge, no inner direction. He is moral when others watch, ethical when others praise, confident when others agree. But when he's alone, he feels hollow, because he's realized too late that his reflection belongs to everyone but him. And the worst part? The world he tried so hard to please doesn't care. They move on. They always do. He's left staring at a version of himself built from fragments of everyone else's expectations, a mask assembled from borrowed approval. It fits perfectly, yet feels suffocating. He has become a stranger in his own skin. And here lies the Machiavellian paradox. Power begins the moment a man stops asking for permission to perceive. The world fears such men, not because they're violent, but because they see clearly. The one who trusts his instincts cannot be gaslit. He cannot be manipulated through flattery or guilt. He knows when he's being lied to because he knows how truth feels in his body. He is calm but unyielding, quiet but certain. That kind of man is dangerous, not because he controls others, but because he cannot be controlled. But for most men, reaching that point feels impossible, because the next sign, the fifth, is the one that keeps them trapped. It's the reason they keep silencing their instincts. It's the poison that keeps them obedient, polite, and paralyzed, and it hides beneath a single word they mistake for virtue: guilt. That's the fifth sign, the invisible chain that keeps men obedient long after the world has stopped demanding it. You'll see it in the way he hesitates before saying no, the way his chest tightens when he rests, as though peace must be paid for, the way he flinches when he disappoints someone, even slightly. Guilt is the emotion of the self-betrayed. It's the echo of a man who has violated his own truth too many times, until he begins to feel bad simply for existing freely. Society calls guilt a moral compass, but for most men, it's a leash. It's how power is maintained without force. Because a man who feels guilty for his own desires will police himself on behalf of others. He'll surrender without ever being asked. It begins with conditioning. From an early age, men are taught that goodness means compliance, that virtue means sacrifice, that decency means never making anyone uncomfortable. They are praised not for power, but for restraint, and over time they internalize this lesson so deeply that any expression of strength feels like sin. They don't even need oppressors anymore. They carry their own inside their heads. Every time they assert themselves, a voice whispers, "You're selfish." Every time they say no, it says, "You're ungrateful." Every time they pursue what they want, it hisses, "Who do you think you are?" This is how the mind of a man turns against itself. He becomes his own warden, guarding the gates of a prison built from moral confusion. He calls it humility, conscience, or empathy, but it's really self-censorship dressed as virtue. You can recognize this man easily. He's the one who apologizes when others fail him. He's the one who says, "It's fine," when he's been disrespected. He stays quiet to keep peace, even when that peace comes at the expense of his dignity. He overgives, over-explains, overcompensates, not because he's kind, but because he's terrified of being seen as cruel. He mistakes boundaries for betrayal. He cannot disappoint without feeling unworthy. His entire identity is built around being the good one, the nice one, the reliable one. But inside, there's resentment, heavy, silent, and growing. Because no man can live in perpetual guilt without hating the source of it, himself. And soon that hatred starts to look like virtue too. He'll say, "I just hold myself to a high standard." But that standard was never his. It was imposed by those who benefited from his compliance. Here's the Machiavellian truth. Guilt is one of the most efficient tools of control ever invented. It requires no chains, no threats, no weapons, only suggestion. Make a man believe that self-expression equals selfishness, and he'll muzzle himself forever. Convince him that confidence is arrogance, and he'll shrink on his own. Teach him that loyalty means self-denial, and he'll serve others even as they betray him. And the beauty of it, for those who exploit him, is that he'll feel good about it. He'll take pride in his servitude. He'll say things like, "I just want everyone to be happy," while dying inside. He'll find moral comfort in his own misery, because it allows him to keep believing he's good. But goodness without self-respect is just obedience with better branding. Guilt feeds on empathy. The more a man can imagine the feelings of others, the more ammunition guilt has against him. He'll overanalyze every word, every action, wondering if he's caused pain. He'll apologize preemptively, even when no one's hurt. He'll start censoring himself, not to be kind, but to avoid discomfort. His morality will turn into masochism, a need to suffer in order to prove his goodness. He'll forgive too quickly, give too easily, love too recklessly, not because he's strong, but because guilt won't let him do otherwise. He thinks he's maintaining peace, but he's actually feeding parasites. And the longer this continues, the more the world learns to exploit it. They'll guilt him into silence, guilt him into generosity, guilt him into exhaustion, and one day when he finally collapses, they'll call him such a good man. Because society doesn't love martyrs, it just loves how quiet they are while burning. But guilt does something even more sinister. It rewires identity. The man begins to feel undeserving of happiness itself. When life gives him ease, he sabotages it. When someone loves him, he withdraws. When things go well, he waits for punishment. He's addicted to atonement. He seeks situations that confirm his self-contempt, unstable partners, demanding jobs, impossible goals. Because comfort feels foreign to him, he doesn't know how to exist without paying for it. If life gets too kind, guilt whispers, "You don't deserve this." And he listens. He always listens, until every good thing turns to ash in his hands. This is how self-hatred sustains itself, through guilt disguised as morality. The more he tries to be good, the more he erases himself. There's a darker truth underneath it all. Guilt thrives in the absence of clarity. A man who doesn't know his own values will borrow others, and guilt will punish him every time they conflict. He'll feel bad for resting because someone told him success never sleeps. He'll feel bad for succeeding because someone told him humility means dimming his light. He'll feel bad for defending himself because someone told him love means forgiveness. Guilt is not a moral signal, it's confusion wearing a halo. It's what happens when your conscience is programmed by other people's expectations. You're not being ethical, you're being managed. And until a man defines his own code, he'll always be haunted by theirs. He'll live in a constant state of apology, bowing to ghosts of rules he never agreed to follow. And here's the cost. A guilty man cannot command respect. People might like him, but they'll never fear disappointing him. He teaches others how to treat him by how easily he forgives them. They sense his guilt and weaponize it. They push boundaries because they know he'll cave. They lie because they know he'll rationalize. They take because they know he'll keep giving. And he calls it love. But what it really is emotional slavery. Because you can't inspire loyalty through guilt. You can only breed dependency and contempt. The more he tries to please, the less he's respected. The more he apologizes, the less he's believed. Guilt makes him predictable, and predictability is death to power. But the next sign is worse. Because guilt may keep a man obedient, but shame makes him disappear entirely. Shame doesn't just tell him he did something wrong. It tells him he is something wrong. It's the final corruption of identity when the man no longer feels guilty for what he's done, but for what he is. And once that happens, even the idea of redemption becomes unreachable. Shame, the sixth sign, is the disease of the soul that convinces a man he is fundamentally unworthy of respect, love, or redemption. It's what happens when guilt evolves into identity. Guilt says, "I made a mistake." Shame whispers, "I am the mistake." And when a man believes that, everything he does becomes an attempt to hide it. His confidence becomes performance. His humility becomes disguise. His kindness becomes camouflage. Shame is not visible like anger or sadness. It's a quiet corrosion that eats away at his sense of being, until even his victories feel fraudulent. You can see it in the way he downplays compliments, the way he flinches when looked at too long, the way he can't hold eye contact when speaking about his past. He fears being seen, not because of what he's done, but because of what he believes he is. A man consumed by shame doesn't chase success for joy, he chases it for relief. Every achievement is an attempt to silence the voice that calls him unworthy. But the silence never lasts. Because shame cannot be outrun. The more he achieves, the more fraudulent he feels. The higher he climbs, the more terrified he becomes of being found out. He hides behind discipline, work, intelligence, anything that makes him appear in control. But at night, when the noise fades, he returns to himself, and what he sees is the same wound staring back, the one he's been too afraid to look at. This is the true nature of shame. It makes a man build an empire on quicksand. No matter how high he rises, the foundation trembles, because beneath every act of power lies the quiet terror that he's undeserving of it. This kind of man is everywhere. The perfectionist, the overachiever, the caretaker. To the world, he looks admirable. But his discipline is not devotion, it's desperation. His generosity isn't love, it's atonement. His ambition isn't drive, it's escape. Shame turns strength into servitude. It makes him work harder than everyone else just to feel equal. He holds himself to impossible standards because deep down, he believes he's defective, so he keeps polishing himself, hoping one day he'll finally feel clean. But you can't wash away a stain that only exists in your imagination, and so he keeps scrubbing and scrubbing until he bleeds. People call him admirable. They say, "You're so dedicated." But they don't realize he's dying under the weight of his own expectations. The tragedy is that he doesn't realize it either. He thinks he's fixing himself, but in truth, he's punishing himself for existing. Shame breeds secrecy. The man who carries it begins to hide not only his flaws, but also his humanity. He edits his personality until it's socially acceptable. He suppresses anger, desire, curiosity, anything that might expose the truth he's terrified of, that he's not as good, as smart, as pure as he pretends. He becomes obsessed with control. Every conversation becomes calculation. Every expression becomes rehearsed. He can't laugh too loudly, can't speak too freely, can't admit weakness, because vulnerability feels like confession, and confession feels like death. But this performance eventually collapses, because no man can live permanently behind a mask. The more perfect he pretends to be, the more isolated he becomes. People may admire him, but they never truly know him, and in that distance, shame thrives, because shame feeds on isolation. It needs secrecy, the way a fire needs oxygen. Here's the Machiavellian truth. Shame is the perfect tool for domination, because it makes a man police himself indefinitely. You don't need to threaten him. You don't need to punish him. Just make him believe that something inside him is inherently wrong, and he'll destroy himself trying to fix it. He'll censor his opinions to seem polite. He'll hide his intelligence to seem humble. He'll mute his ambition to avoid envy. He'll break his own spirit just to remain likable. And every time he does, the world will reward him with praise for being good. But goodness born from shame is not virtue, it's compliance. It's how society tames men with potential. Make them ashamed of their hunger, their aggression, their dominance, and you neutralize them without lifting a sword. The strongest men are not conquered by others, they're convinced to conquer themselves. Shame turns a man's life into an endless apology. Even when no one accuses him, he defends himself. Even when no one judges him, he explains himself. He cannot rest in silence because silence feels incriminating, so he keeps performing, proving, apologizing. He smiles when he's angry, jokes when he's hurt, and hides when he's proud. He convinces himself that self-effacement is maturity. But it's not, it's fear, and fear breeds mediocrity. You cannot lead if you're ashamed of being seen. You cannot inspire if you're terrified of exposure. You cannot love if you believe you're unworthy of it. The man who hates himself through shame becomes a ghost present but hollow. He participates in life, but never inhabits it fully. His laughter sounds borrowed, his confidence rehearsed. He exists like an echo, a shadow of the man he could have been if he'd stopped apologizing for existing. There's a moment, a quiet one, when shame begins to break. It's when the man finally grows tired of pretending. When he realizes that every person he's ever admired carries their own stain. That purity was never the goal, power was. That the world was never interested in perfection, only in control. And in that moment, something dangerous happens. He begins to stop caring about approval. He stops hiding his hunger, his flaws, his fire. He stops seeking forgiveness for being human. And for the first time, he feels a glimpse of freedom. But most men never reach that moment. Because before shame dies, it transforms. It doesn't vanish, it changes shape. It becomes something even more deceptive: humility. Not true humility, but the false kind, the one that looks like wisdom but reeks of self-erasure. False humility, the seventh sign, is the most socially accepted form of self-hatred. It's the art of making yourself small and calling it grace. It looks noble, it sounds wise, it earns applause. But it's not humility at all. It's fear wearing manners. The man trapped in false humility has mastered the performance of modesty. He dismisses praise before it lands. He denies his power before it can be recognized. He gives credit to everyone but himself, not because he's kind, but because he's terrified of standing tall. He calls himself humble, but he's really just scared of his own potential. He's been trained to believe that visibility is vanity, that confidence is arrogance, that power is pride, and so he dimly exists, half seen, half heard, half alive, proud of being harmless. This man has been rewarded all his life for playing small. When he lowers his voice, they call him polite. When he downplays his achievements, they call him mature. When he steps aside, they call him gracious. But inside, he's eroding. Every act of false humility chips away at his sense of ownership. He gives and gives and gives, but never truly claims. He believes it's wrong to feel proud, wrong to stand out, wrong to assert, because somewhere along the way, someone told him that great men are quiet and quiet men are good. But Machiavelli would tell you the truth. The world doesn't reward quiet goodness, it ignores it. And nothing kills a man's potential faster than the illusion that humility means silence. False humility is seductive because it feels moral. It allows a man to hide behind virtue while avoiding confrontation with his own greatness. He can tell himself, "I'm not like them," meaning the loud, the confident, the ambitious. He looks down on those who seek power, all while secretly envying them. His humility becomes a disguise for resentment. He calls the proud arrogant because he cannot stand to see his own reflection in their courage. But here's the truth: genuine humility is power under control. False humility is power under denial. One elevates the man who wields it, the other chains him to the floor. The man who hates himself cannot handle admiration, so when the world offers it, he spits it back, pretending it doesn't matter. But it does, it always does. He wants to be seen, but he fears the responsibility that comes with being seen, and so he hides in plain sight. You can see it in the way he speaks. Every sentence ends with deflection. Every compliment is dismissed. "It's nothing," he says. "I just got lucky. It's not that great." He refuses to inhabit his own accomplishments because deep down, he believes he doesn't deserve them. When others rise, he cheers. When he rises, he apologizes. When someone calls him exceptional, he shrinks. He wants to disappear into modesty, thinking it will make him loved. But people don't love the man who hides. They pity him. They take his self-effacement as permission to forget him. And soon he becomes exactly that, forgettable. Because power unclaimed becomes invisible, and invisible men don't move the world. False humility also breeds dishonesty, because when you pretend to be smaller than you are, you must lie, not to others, but to yourself. You must distort your perception until your greatness feels like arrogance, and your competence feels like luck. You start believing the lie you tell, that you are less than you are, that you must stay low to stay pure, and slowly, you begin to despise anyone who embodies what you suppress. You'll mock confidence as ego. You'll call ambition greed. You'll brand power as corruption. But what you're really expressing is envy, the envy of those who gave themselves permission to exist without apology. You're not humble, you're starving. You've mistaken meekness for morality because it's easier than admitting you're afraid of your own reflection. Here's the Machiavellian truth. The world doesn't admire false humility. It exploits it. It sees your reluctance to claim your worth and uses it as leverage. Employers will pay you less because you won't ask. Friends will overlook you because you won't demand space. Lovers will grow cold because you won't assert need. And society will call it your virtue. They'll say he's so grounded, so unselfish. But what they mean is, he's no threat. That's the real reward of false humility, safety at the cost of significance. You won't offend anyone, but you'll also never command anyone. You'll be liked but never respected. You'll be remembered, but only as someone who made others comfortable. And in your silence, you'll wonder why life keeps passing through your hands like water. The man consumed by false humility often disguises his self-hatred as spirituality. He quotes sages, preaches detachment, speaks of egolessness. He says things like, "I'm just a vessel," or "It's not about me." But beneath that rhetoric is fear, fear of taking full ownership of his being. True spirituality doesn't erase the self, it refines it. It doesn't demand disappearance, it demands mastery. The man who truly transcends ego can step into power without guilt, speak with conviction without arrogance, and lead without apology. But the man who hates himself hides behind the language of surrender. He calls it peace, when it's really withdrawal. He confuses invisibility for enlightenment. And soon the same philosophy that could have freed him becomes the justification for his cage. False humility isn't quietness, it's self-erasure. And the more he practices it, the more the world confirms his invisibility. People talk over him, underestimate him, overlook him. Opportunities slip away because he refuses to announce himself. He tells himself it's fine, that destiny will find him. But destiny favors those who declare themselves worthy of it. Power never visits the man who hides. And so his life becomes a cycle of potential unrealized, talent unclaimed, and respect unearned, all in the name of humility. Yet if you strip away the moral disguise, what remains is fear, fear of envy, fear of rejection, fear of standing alone. Because to stand tall is to invite judgment, to claim power is to risk isolation, and to be seen fully is to be vulnerable. So he chooses comfort over greatness and calls it virtue. But what comes next is even darker, because while false humility makes a man small, the next sign makes him hollow. It's what happens when self-hatred grows tired of hiding behind virtue and begins to turn outward, when the man who despises himself starts despising the world, when his humility rots into bitterness, and he begins to see every act of confidence in others as an attack on his own insecurity. The next sign is not silence, it's cynicism. And cynicism, unlike humility, doesn't just kill the self, it poisons everything it touches. Cynicism, the eighth sign, is self-hatred turned outward. It's the moment when a man grows tired of losing to himself and begins taking revenge on the world. He no longer seeks peace, he seeks proof that life is as broken as he feels inside. He doesn't trust love, kindness, or sincerity, because he has none left for himself. He calls his bitterness realism, his resentment wisdom, his withdrawal intelligence. But cynicism is not insight, it's infection. It spreads through his thoughts like rust, corroding every trace of warmth until all that remains is suspicion. He mocks hope because he's afraid of disappointment. He ridicules ambition because he's too tired to try. He belittles others' dreams because they remind him of the faith he's lost. This is the man who laughs when others speak of purpose, not because he's strong, but because he's empty. He tells himself he's seen too much, knows too much, been hurt too much. He prides himself on being unillusioned, yet lives entirely in illusion, the illusion that detachment is protection. He calls himself realistic, but reality isn't cruel, only his reflection of it is. The cynic mistakes numbness for clarity. He believes his skepticism gives him power, but it robs him of connection, wonder, and possibility. He says, "People always disappoint," but what he really means is, "I always let myself down first." He says, "Love is manipulation," but what he means is, "I never learned how to love without fear." He believes he's escaping pain by rejecting belief, but disbelief is its own kind of prison, one without light, without risk, without hope. It's the safest hell a man can build for himself. Cynicism feels smart because it protects him from embarrassment. He never looks naive, never gets fooled, never risks vulnerability. But what he doesn't see is that this protection comes at the cost of possibility. To be cynical is to live life through a window, observing, judging, but never touching. It's emotional cowardice dressed as intelligence. He says he sees through everything, but when you see through everything, you see nothing at all. Because meaning requires belief, trust requires risk, growth requires hope. Without them, he's left only with irony, a weapon that shields him from sincerity. He jokes when something touches him deeply. He sneers when something inspires him. He calls idealists stupid, dreamers naive, lovers blind, yet secretly he envies them, because at least they still feel alive. The cynical man doesn't realize he's feeding the very despair he resents. Every time he mocks someone's joy, he deepens his own emptiness. Every time he predicts failure, he manifests it. Every time he distrusts kindness, he creates isolation. His worldview becomes self-fulfilling. The more he distrusts, the more betrayal he attracts. The more he expects disappointment, the more life gives it to him. He becomes addicted to his own pessimism because it gives him certainty. He can't control the world, but he can always predict the worst, and that prediction becomes his comfort. At least I'm not surprised, he tells himself, as if preparing for pain were the same as overcoming it. But preparing for pain only ensures he never experiences anything else. Here's the Machiavellian truth. Cynicism is not wisdom, it's the corpse of wisdom preserved in bitterness. It's what happens when intelligence loses faith. The true strategist observes corruption but still plays the game to win. The cynic observes corruption and calls the whole game meaningless. He mistakes awareness for superiority, detachment for mastery. But detachment without purpose is decay. The man who hates himself uses cynicism as armor, not to protect from the world, but from the ache of caring. Because caring hurts when you believe you don't matter. So he builds his identity around disillusionment. He finds belonging in irony, status in sarcasm. He surrounds himself with others like him, people who confuse coldness for clarity. Together they form echo chambers of despair, worshipping their own apathy as proof of intelligence. The tragedy of the cynic is that beneath all his bitterness lies sensitivity. He feels too deeply, which is why he shut down. He once believed in love, in meaning, in greatness, and was shattered when they disappointed him. So now he preemptively destroys what he once cherished. He mocks what he fears will abandon him. But his cruelty is just grief wearing armor. He's not evil, he's heartbroken. Every sarcastic remark hides a longing to believe again. Every cynical smirk hides the memory of the man he used to be, hopeful, trusting, alive. But hope requires courage, and courage demands self-respect. Without self-respect, hope feels humiliating, so he stays bitter, pretending it's safer. He believes he's protecting himself, but he's really just embalming his own potential. The cynic cannot inspire, because to inspire requires belief. And you cannot lead what you secretly despise. He repels warmth, because warmth exposes his wounds. People sense it, his hidden contempt, his quiet hopelessness, and they withdraw. He tells himself it's because they're shallow, fake, naive, but it's because they can feel the void he carries. They feel how unsafe it is to believe near someone who worships disbelief. Cynicism is contagious. It kills trust faster than betrayal. It turns every conversation into competition, every gesture into suspicion, every dream into delusion. It's psychological rot. And once it settles in, it's hard to cure, because it convinces the sufferer that nothing needs curing. He'll say, "I'm fine, I just see the world for what it is." But what he really means is, "I've forgotten what hope feels like." And the cruelest part, the cynic still craves the very things he mocks. Love, meaning, success, connection. But he wants them without the risk of disappointment. He wants certainty in a world that runs on faith. So he stays still, arms crossed, heart closed, telling himself he's above it all. But detachment doesn't make him wise, it makes him irrelevant. The world moves without him, grows without him, loves without him, and slowly he begins to rot from the inside, mistaking decay for depth. Because cynicism is not maturity, it's just resignation in a clever disguise. Yet there is a final evolution of self-hatred, darker than cynicism. It's what happens when bitterness stops attacking the world and starts feeding on itself again. When the man's contempt turns inward, and he becomes both the executioner and the condemned. It's not guilt, it's not shame, it's despair, the ninth sign. The point where self-hate no longer hides, no longer apologizes, no longer pretends, it just consumes. Despair, the ninth sign, is the quiet death that comes long before the body stops breathing. It's the final collapse of a man's will to rise, to fight, to believe that his existence still carries weight. Despair is not sadness. Sadness has movement, a pulse, a plea for change. Despair is the stillness after that, the moment when even suffering feels pointless. It's when the man stops reaching for meaning and begins rehearsing disappearance. He doesn't cry, he doesn't rage, he just fades. To the world he looks calm, composed, maybe even mature, but inside there's nothing left moving, just a slow erosion, the sound of the soul giving up. You can recognize despair not by what a man does, but by what he no longer does. He stops pursuing excellence, stops caring about respect, stops defending himself against insult or injustice. He lets people misunderstand him because correction requires energy he no longer has. He stops chasing dreams, not because he's achieved them, but because he's convinced they wouldn't change anything anyway. His routines continue, his body functions, his words still form sentences, but his life has lost authorship. He wakes not to live, but to avoid being awake. He walks not toward purpose, but away from pain. This is the slow suicide of the spirit, invisible, polite, and applauded by those who mistake apathy for composure. Despair makes a man allergic to hope. Every spark of optimism feels like mockery. He hears advice as noise, encouragement as insult. He's built such a fortress of disappointment that he can no longer imagine victory without irony. When others speak of redemption, he smirks. When others speak of healing, he says, "That's not how the world works." What he means is, "That's not how my world works anymore." He believes he's being realistic, but realism without faith is just despair dressed in reason. He calls it acceptance, but acceptance without effort is surrender. Despair is what happens when intelligence loses direction, when a mind sharp enough to see the truth forgets how to endure it. This kind of man stops seeking pleasure because pleasure feels undeserved. He stops seeking love because love feels dangerous. He stops seeking power because power feels futile. He tells himself he's simplifying life, when really he's stripping it bare of color. He begins to take pride in his numbness. He calls himself detached, self-sufficient, at peace. But peace without vitality is death disguised as maturity. Despair is clever. It knows how to imitate wisdom. It makes a man sound profound when he's really just broken. It turns exhaustion into philosophy, emptiness into enlightenment, defeat into calm. He says, "I've outgrown ambition," but what he's really saying is, "I've stopped believing I can win." The Machiavellian truth is this: despair is the perfect endpoint of self-hatred because it requires no maintenance. Guilt demands apology, shame demands disguise, cynicism demands argument, but despair asks for nothing and takes everything. It doesn't need chaos to destroy you, it only needs silence. A man consumed by despair stops defending his mind. He lets intrusive thoughts nest inside him. He mistakes the absence of pain for peace, not realizing that numbness is just pain's shadow. He thinks he's found balance, but he's really found the midpoint between life and death. And once a man begins to accept despair as normal, he becomes a ghost in his own timeline, present but irrelevant. There's a deeper layer though, the despair that hides behind competence. The man who smiles, performs, achieves, and yet feels nothing. He works efficiently, speaks wisely, keeps his world in order. People call him dependable, admirable, disciplined. But when the day ends and the applause fades, he feels the same cold void waiting at home. That's the despair of the functioning man, the man who's too proud to break, too controlled to cry, too strong to collapse. He wears his suffering like armor. He doesn't want help, because help feels like exposure. So he keeps functioning, he keeps achieving, he keeps pretending, and no one notices that he died long ago, not physically, but spiritually. He lives among the living, but his heart beats elsewhere. Despair erases time. Days blur together, victories feel irrelevant. The future becomes a rumor he no longer believes in. He says it is what it is, not out of acceptance, but out of exhaustion. The fire that once drove him, ambition, love, revenge, anything, has turned to smoke. He becomes immune to praise and criticism alike. You can't hurt him, but you can't reach him either. That's the secret tragedy of despair. It makes a man invincible and irrelevant at the same time. No one can touch him because nothing inside him responds anymore. The light goes out, but the machinery keeps running. He's alive out of habit. Yet, beneath all this decay, there remains a faint pulse, a memory of power, of hunger, of the man he once was. And sometimes that memory flickers. Sometimes he catches himself longing for something, not pleasure, not success, but resurrection. He dreams of feeling again, of returning to himself. But the distance feels infinite. Despair tells him that hope is gone forever. But the truth, the brutal, beautiful truth, is that despair is not the end, it's the turning point. Because once a man has lost everything, he's finally free to rebuild without illusion. But that rebirth doesn't begin in light, it begins in darkness. It starts with the 10th and final sign, the one that ends the pattern and begins the reckoning. The moment when self-hatred burns itself out and something ancient awakens beneath the ashes. It's not confidence, it's not positivity, it's something far more dangerous. The 10th sign is rebirth through defiance, when a man finally decides that he will no longer beg to exist. Defiance, the 10th and final sign, is the point where destruction turns into creation, where a man's hatred for himself finally mutates into rebellion against the very mindset that enslaved him. It's not peace, it's not healing, it's the moment of revolt, raw, violent, liberating. After despair has stripped everything away, every illusion, every comfort, every excuse, what remains is the one thing self-hatred could never destroy: will. The will to say, enough. The will to stop begging to exist. The will to rise, not out of hope, but out of fury. Because a man who has lost everything has nothing left to fear. And in that emptiness, defiance is born. It's not optimism that resurrects him, it's refusal. Refusal to stay small, refusal to stay silent, refusal to keep dying politely. This man doesn't wake up gentle, he wakes up dangerous. He's no longer trying to be good, he's trying to be real. He's done apologizing for what he wants, what he feels, what he is. The same shame that once paralyzed him now becomes fuel. He doesn't need permission anymore. He doesn't ask to be accepted, he demands to be recognized. And the beauty of it is, he's not even angry at the world anymore. He's simply uninterested in its approval. He stops playing the game of worthiness entirely. He knows now that power isn't granted, it's reclaimed. The chains were never real. The prison was built from guilt, fear, and lies, and he's walked through its open door. This is not confidence, it's clarity, cold, sharp, immovable. The kind that comes from realizing you were never broken, only convinced that you were. Defiance is the rebirth of instinct. It's when a man begins to trust the voice he buried, the voice that says, "I know who I am." He stops overthinking, stops hesitating, stops filtering his truth through the comfort of others. He speaks, moves, and acts with the calm certainty of someone who has nothing left to lose. The same world that once made him beg now fears his silence. He no longer seeks to be liked. He seeks alignment. He no longer seeks belonging. He builds his own domain, and for the first time, his reflection doesn't disgust him. He meets his own eyes without flinching, because the man who once apologized for existing has finally remembered that existence itself is the only justification he ever needed. Here's the Machiavellian truth. Defiance is divine. It's the reclamation of the godlike quality buried inside man, the ability to declare reality instead of merely react to it. Power is not found in perfection, it's found in refusal. The refusal to kneel before one's own doubt. The refusal to let guilt dictate morality. The refusal to keep negotiating for peace in a world that profits from your compliance. Every tyrant, every manipulator, every system of control trembles before the man who decides that his approval is the only one that matters, because that man cannot be blackmailed by shame. He cannot be bribed with comfort. He cannot be broken by isolation. He doesn't need the world to agree with him. He only needs to remain true to his own command. Defiance gives birth to purity, not the purity of innocence, but the purity of sovereignty. It's the moment when the man no longer splits himself between who he is and who he's told to be. His thoughts, words, and actions align. He stops pretending, stops adjusting, stops diluting his fire to be tolerated. The world doesn't have to understand him anymore. He understands himself. And in that alignment, his energy shifts. He speaks slower, moves sharper, chooses deliberately. People feel it when he enters a room, not arrogance, but presence. The kind of presence that makes noise irrelevant. Because the man who no longer seeks validation radiates authority without effort. He doesn't dominate through aggression. He dominates through certainty. That's what makes him untouchable. Defiance also changes how he sees others. He no longer pities the weak, nor worships the strong. He simply sees clearly. He recognizes that most people are trapped in the same prisons he escaped: guilt, fear, shame, dependence. He doesn't judge them, but he doesn't join them either. Compassion, yes. Conformity, never. His love becomes selective, his loyalty earned, his silence deliberate. He's no longer chasing connection, he's cultivating empire. And that empire begins within, in the quiet, disciplined command of a man who refuses to betray himself again. That is where freedom starts, not in rebellion against others, but in allegiance to oneself. When that allegiance is complete, the external world bends accordingly, because reality to the defiant man is no longer something he adapts to, it's something he defines. But defiance is not rage. Rage still answers to pain. Defiance answers to truth. Rage burns fast and wild. Defiance endures, cold, focused, sovereign. It's not emotional, it's existential. It's the calm decision to never kneel again. Not to fear, not to guilt, not to the illusion of inferiority. And when a man reaches that point, he doesn't need to shout. His stillness becomes command. His presence becomes statement. His life becomes proof. The very forces that once oppressed him now orbit him. Because he's no longer fighting for validation, he's embodying inevitability. And nothing is more dangerous than a man who no longer asks for power, because he's remembered it was his all along. So this is where it ends, and where it begins. The 10 signs were never a diagnosis. They were a mirror. A reflection of how easily men lose themselves in the name of peace, morality, and acceptance. But every chain described was imagined. Every wound was survivable. And every descent was only a preparation for one thing, awakening. Defiance is that awakening. It's the refusal to live as prey in a world built by predators. It's the moment a man reclaims his authority, his hunger, his unapologetic right to exist. No apologies, no permission, no shame, just a silent, immovable decision. I am here, I will not kneel, and I will never again mistake obedience for peace. If you've made it this far, it's because a part of you already knows this truth. Self-hatred isn't loud, it's quiet. It hides behind overthinking, overworking, and pretending to be fine. You cannot respect yourself while living in denial. Now tell me in the comments, are you ready to face the truth of how you've treated yourself? Are you willing to rebuild, piece by piece, into someone you no longer despise? If this message touched you, if it made sense, write in the comments, I forgive myself. Let's see how many here are truly ready to end their war within. And don't forget, keep watching the next video, it's important. Much more than you imagine. See you there.